This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
When I was working on today's episode, I got the feeling of a corporate thriller. There is a 12,000 crore rupees money laundering scam, a hot probe by investigative agencies, and a court case which is going to get very, very dramatic. Arvind Dham once ran a billion-dollar business, Amtek Auto, one of India's biggest makers of auto parts in the 90s and the next decade. Then things changed. His company owed billions of dollars to banks and became one of the first Indian companies to go legally, officially bankrupt. And now, Dham and his 3-decade-old company are back in the news, accused of a billion-dollar scam. In May this year, a whistleblower filed criminal complaints against Dham and Amtek, with the country's top investigative agency, the CBI, the Economic Law Enforcement Directorate, and the Prime Minister's office. In the complaint, Dham and many of Amtek's senior executives were accused of cheating, fraud, corruption, and of siphoning bank loans. What's more, all of this had been revealed in an audit way back in 2018, but none of it was investigated at all. Meanwhile, Dham himself remains unscathed. He and his family continue to be invested in several businesses, including one of India's most famous coffee chains, Barista. My colleague Jyotindra Dubey, who specializes in these investigative stories for ET Prime, has been digging deep into the allegations since May. And through his reportage in the last few months, he discovered some really staggering details about this case. Complex maze of hundreds of hollow companies, and on their boards, dummy directors. And through all this, fox money trails that lead nowhere. In this episode, we trace all of this and the very intriguing story of Amtek's rise and fall. Our guests today are Jyotindra and my other colleague, ET's banking ace, Sangita Mehta. It's Thursday, the 13th of October. From the Economic Times, I'm Anirban Chowdhury, and today we deep dive into Amtek's 12,000 crore scam. This is the Morning Brief. For his article, which has triggered this episode, Jyotindra sent a detailed set of questions to Amtek Group. None of them were responded to. Hi Jyotindra, welcome to the Morning Brief.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anirban, for inviting me here.
So, I wanted to ask you if you have covered Amtek before, and what attracted you to this story now?
Amtek Group has always been in the limelight. So even when it was a flourishing business and later when it collapsed. So Amtek Group was part of the Dirty Dozen, which was biggest 12 NP accounts admitted into insolvency. So I've been tracking Amtek since then. So while I was reporting on Amtek, I spoke with various former employees of Amtek who have been associated with the group for over decades. I got to know some amazing facts about how they were running a parallel network of shell companies. So Amtek Group has 3 or 4 listed companies, but they also have over 100, 200s of shell companies through which they were, siphoning of funds from the main listed companies. So I started digging further and investigated a lot of these companies, identified a potential list of some doubtful companies which have links with Amtek or erstwhile promoters of the Amtek Group. I saw hundreds of crores getting moved through these companies. Investments are coming in these companies, and these companies are further investing the money in other companies, and even those companies are shell companies. And when I'm saying shell companies, because they don't have any business operations, they're not generating revenues, not making any profits. They are just there to move these funds.
That was the starting point of Jyotindra's reportage in May. In the course of the next couple of months, he pored over the company's financial documents and spoke to dozens of people about them. What these companies did, how they earned, how they were funded, and who were the people running them. What he found out was really strange.
So I started looking into the directors of such companies. Then I started making a list of these directors, and I got their residential addresses through a registrar of companies. So one thing which was like very bizarre was, if a company with a paid up capital of 200 crores, there's a director living in Sangam Vihar, which is one of the biggest slum areas of India. So in North India, I think this is the biggest. Not a very usual address for a director which is handling the company of 200 crores. So there was someone living in Sadarpur village in Noida, Sangam Vihar, and these kind of addresses. I had a list of 30 doubtful directors with their addresses, and I thought I will visit each one of them and see like who they are and what they do.
Wow, you decided to visit 30 directors?
Yeah. And these addresses were like spread across Delhi NCR, from Narayana in Noida, then Burari, like East Delhi, North Delhi, South Delhi, like everywhere.
Right.
So it was a very challenging task, but still there was no other way to verify if they are dummy directors.
That's amazing. Yeah. In the course of his investigation, Jyotindra drove around the length and breadth of these areas. I say drove, but most often he parked his car out on the highway and walked across often 4-5 kilometers of narrow, dingy lanes, doing the rounds of houses that were crammed against each other and that had no existence on Google Maps. In these areas, he was trying to find out the people who were supposed to be board members of companies worth hundreds of crores. The irony of the mismatch was intriguing. Some of these people he tracked down, others he reached on the phone, on numbers he found from the company records on government websites.
There was a director named Shri Bhagwant Kushwaha, and he was a managing director in a company named Swapna Mahal Builders. So I called him and I asked him about this company, like, you are a director in this particular company. What is the business operation of this company? How are you involved? And he was clueless. अच्छा, तो आप क्या करते हैं सर?
सर मैं फील्ड बॉय हूँ।
फील्ड बॉय?
हाँ।
अच्छा अच्छा।
कंपनी में अभी छोड़ चुका हूँ।
अच्छा, कौन सी कंपनी में थे आप?
जो एमटेक ऑटो कंपनी था सर।
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा। तो आपको इसमें आइडिया नहीं है कि आप डायरेक्टर वगैरह हैं इस पे?
अब सर मान लीजिए पेपर पे कहीं भी अगर कंपनी साइन करवा देती है, अब उसके आगे मेरे को क्या आइडिया है?
जी जी बिल्कुल।
कंपनी में है तो मान कुछ हमें तो आइडिया ही नहीं है क्या।
तो अभी आपने कंपनी छोड़ दी है ना?
हाँ जी।
अच्छा अच्छा, ठीक है, नहीं कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। आपके बारे में तो उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। कंपनी के बारे में जानकारी चाहिए थी, तो कोई अच्छा अच्छा। He said, I don't know about this company. I haven't heard the name of this company. So I said, were you associated with Amtek Group anyhow? So he said, yes, I was working with Amtek, but I've left Amtek. I've left working there, and it's been more than a year now.
Okay.
And what was your job profile at Amtek? And he said, I was an office boy. Then I said, you are a director in at least 10 companies. So do you know about these companies? Because we used to sign some documents, and the company secretary's team used to give us some documents and we used to sign them, but we don't know like what these companies do, what is their business operation. We used to just sign it because our seniors used to tell us. And this guy is a managing director of a company with a paid capital of 200 crores.
Most, like Kushwaha, didn't have a clue. Some were slightly more forthcoming with information. Others were slightly more aware. Jyotindra found someone who called himself a company law expert.
हेलो।
हाँ जी, ये मनमोहन सिंह बिंद्रा जी बात कर रहे हैं?
हाँ जी हाँ जी।
हाँ जी, मैं ज्योतिन्द्र दुबे बोल रहा हूँ इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स से।
हाँ जी सर।
हाँ जी, 2 मिनट बात हो सकती है आपसे?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
हाँ जी, ये आप एमटेक कंपनी में काम करते हैं?
हाँ जी हाँ जी।
ये अभी भी कर रहे हैं?
हाँ जी कर रहा हूँ।
किस डिपार्टमेंट में हैं सर आप?
सर मैं डायरेक्टर हूँ।
मतलब किस कंपनी में?
सर 3-4 कंपनीज में हूँ सर।
ओके,
सो ये आप जो कंपनीज हैं आपकी, ये कंपनीज क्या काम करती हैं?
रियल एस्टेट का है
आपकी और ये नरेंद्र कौर बिंद्रा आपकी वाइफ है?
हाँ जी
वो भी डायरेक्टर है?
हाँ जी।
ओके, तो ये जो कंपनीज हैं जिसमें आप दोनों डायरेक्टर हैं, इसका मुझे बताएंगे कि रियल एस्टेट कंपनी है, क्या करती है, कहाँ कोई प्रोजेक्ट है इनके?
प्रोजेक्ट उन्होंने स्टार्ट करने थे, पता नहीं किसी वजह से वो जो बीच में रिसेशन आ गया, उस वजह से ये कर नहीं पाए सर।
अच्छा, तो अभी कंपनी का क्या चल रहा है इसमें?
तो अभी ये रिवाइव करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं उसमें।
और कौन कौन है आपके साथ यहाँ पे जो कंपनी में इन्वॉल्व है?
सर मैं तो प्रोफेशनल के साथ, पहले प्रोफेशनल के ग्रुप था उनके साथ अटैच था मैं ना।
अच्छा।
तो वही उन्होंने जैसे बताया गया था कि ऐसे ऐसे आगे एक्सप्लोर करेंगी तो कंपनीज करेंगे।
आप कंपनी सेक्रेटरी हैं?
नहीं, कंपनी सेक्रेटरी नहीं हूँ सर। कंपनी लॉ से मेरे को 35 इयर्स का एक्सपीरियंस है।
ओके, तो आप एमटेक वालों के साथ कितने सालों से जुड़े हैं?
ये अभी 3-4 साल से जुड़ा हूँ सर।
पैसा कौन लगा रहा है इस कंपनी में? एमटेक वाले लगा रहे हैं?
ये तो सर मुझे मालूम नहीं है, क्योंकि प्रोफेशनल फ्रेंड्स हैं, वो एक बार उनसे पता करना पड़ेगा।
तो आप डायरेक्टर हैं, आप जिस कंपनी में डायरेक्टर हैं, आपको आइडिया नहीं कि कौन फंडिंग कर रहा है?
सर इतना मैंने अभी ध्यान नहीं दिया एक्चुअली, क्योंकि अभी भी इनका कुछ।
और आपकी वाइफ का क्या रोल है एज अ डायरेक्टर?
हाँ जी,
आपकी वाइफ का क्या रोल है एज अ डायरेक्टर?
सर मैं कह रहा हूँ ना, जब हमने स्टार्ट किया तो उस टाइम था कि आगे करेंगे।
नहीं, उनका क्या बैकग्राउंड है इससे पहले?
हाँ जी,
आपकी वाइफ का क्या बैकग्राउंड है?
अभी कोई बैकग्राउंड नहीं है, पहले ये अपना इसमें सेल्स मार्केटिंग में था इनका।
अच्छा।
हाँ जी, तो वो इसमें था कि चलो ये भी करेंगे।
इस कंपनी में आने के लिए किसने इनवाइट किया?
सर मेरे प्रोफेशनल फ्रेंड्स हैं, उन्होंने इनवाइट किया था।
तो नाम बताएंगे?
मैं आपसे बात करता हूँ अभी थोड़ी देर में।
So that's how I got a list of 15 such names who are either office boys, cashiers, peons, who are working with Amtek Group. But
in how many companies?
At least 10, 15 directorships. For some people, it's over 30. And even for some companies, they were previously directors, but now they have resigned. On an average, we can say 10 to 12 companies at least.
How long did you do this? Like a month?
Took me nearly a month to verify and identify these 15 dummy directors, because I started with a list of some 30 plus names. Then I managed to verify these 15 names.
The dummy directors are one part of this puzzle. Think of them as placeholders in this complex maze of hollow companies which act as conduits that transfer money from one to the other until that money trail is lost.
The auditing standards of these companies are very much questionable. So I can give you an example. So in a particular company, some 500 crores were invested. And the audited balance sheet of that particular company said that they have invested the same amount in other companies, but they haven't mentioned any names. So investing some 500 crores and not in mentioning the investee company, which is very questionable.
Right.
That's how these companies are used. Even their ownerships are very obscure. So you will find various cross-holdings. So a company A will be owned by 5 other companies, and these 5 companies will be owned by other 5-10 companies. So that's how they hide the ownership of these companies through layered ownership, so that it's difficult to reach the ultimate beneficiary.
All of these revelations are part of the whistleblower's petition. The case is now in the Supreme Court.
So this particular case is being heard by a bench led by the Chief Justice of India, U. Lalit. And while hearing the arguments from the petitioner's side, he came on record and said that you have an excellent case. And then he issued notices to the investigating agencies that why there hasn't been any investigation against the erstwhile promoters of the Amtek Group, which is the Dham family. In that whistleblower complaint, they have submitted the forensic audit report. So this forensic audit report was conducted by EY on Amtek Auto, which is the flagship company of the Amtek Group. And in that forensic audit, they have identified a list of 127 shell companies which are potentially related to the Arvind Dham or other family members. And they have also listed some directives common with Amtek Group companies and those shell companies. So in all these shell companies, which I checked or which the forensic audit mentions, there is a common link. Either you will find some common director who was also director in Amtek companies, some former Amtek employees, or a common registered address. So the companies which I looked into, at least 90% of those companies were registered at one address, located at Madangir in South Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
So in that one address, there were hundreds of companies registered, and there are various Amtek Group companies also registered at the same address. So that establishes the link between these shell companies and official Amtek Group companies. So there is definitely a link between them.
127 shell companies, more than 30 dummy directors, a 12,000 crore rupees scam. Almost every company that runs into scams has seen better days. But the difference between Amtek's days of glory and reputation and what it has come to now is especially stark. To trace its very interesting history, I turn to Sangita, my colleague who has reported and broken stories on almost every big development in banking and lending in the last decade. So, Sangita, I want to ask you, for more than 20 years, Amtek Auto was quite a favorite of the India automotive industry. And then, of course, investors and the stock market wants it listed. What led to this rise, first of all?
So, well, to be fair, Amtek Auto had a very promising start. Arvind Dham was a first-generation entrepreneur. His family business was into construction, but he was not interested in family business. In fact, he studied architecture from University of New York, but it never interested him much. He got in the business of supplying components to automobile companies, and his first break came from Maruti, where he won the contract to supply parts to Maruti 800. And this is way back in 1985. But the biggest turning point for him was when the economy opened up. And that is when Arvind Dham won actually contracts from Tata Motors, Ford, Fiat. And that is how his business started growing very rapidly because, once the economy opened up, everybody started, there was a huge demand for cars. And he also kind of expanded his business big time. But thereafter, he wanted to grow really fast. He acquired 22 companies overseas. And remember, all of this was debt-funded acquisition. It was not really coming from revenue. Between 2010 and 2017, Amtek started borrowing heavily. Its debt rose from 3,800 crore to 14,200 crore. And that was huge, just 3 times. So these were series of acquisitions in the range of 700 to 500 crore. And back then, they were pretty expensive acquisition because they were all on borrowed money.
When did the fall start happening?
Yeah, so the growth that he had in mind or the kind of growth estimates that they had didn't really kind of match up with the expansion that they had. It led to cash flow mismanagement. Then the first sign of trouble started sometime in 2015 when he defaulted to lenders on loans. This was in the June quarter of 2015. Actually, at that time, lenders did not worry much, which was a big flaw on their side because they thought, it's Amtek Auto, it's a blue chip, it's Arvind Dham, he will never default kind of thing. It was unthinkable, it was like such a big name back then. And then in September, the very next quarter, he defaulted on his bond payment, 800 crore.
Here's Amtek's managing director, Gautam Malhotra, just 1 month before the first big default.
Gautam, I want to clarify one doubt which the market has been raising is that you have trouble in terms of your lenders right now and they've formed a forum to actually get the dues out. If you could tell us if that's right.
No, there's nothing like getting the dues out and anything with our lenders is actually between our lenders and us private. So there's nothing like getting a dues out from us.
Okay, but Bank of Maharashtra had told us that the $70 million FCCB repayment that you had to make, there's some issue that's going on that front and a joint lender forum has been formed. Is that incorrect?
So the $70 million FCCB is actually cannot be subscribed by any Indian institution. It's an FCCB. It's subscribed by international funds. And as of 31st July, we had actually put in a notice to convert that into equity. So there's no recall on it yet.
And then Amtek came up with a scheme that will convert 20,000 crore of debt into equity. 20,000 crore of debt again came into the eye of public that, oh, Amtek has so much of debt in its book. Of course, bankers didn't buy that story and then they never converted that debt into equity. But the thing is that it became very clear that this company can't survive or hold on its own.
Next year, the government came up with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, IBC.
So RBI also wanted to send out a clear message that we have to bring the big corporates into IBC so that, this is a new law and let's have the big cases there. So it sets an example for others kind of thing.
And then, of course, the company became part of that so-called dirty dozen.
Yes.
So that resolution process took, I think, 4 to 5 years. And
5 years. Actually, it started in 2017. Even when it entered insolvency, Amtek appeared to be a very promising company. For instance, Apollo Global Management, Aeon, SSG Capital, these were the companies which had actually shown interest in acquiring it. And they submitted an expression of interest to acquire this company. And later, when the data room was opened up for them to look into the assets of Amtek Auto, they realized that assets are not really valuing as much as they should. Or the kind of aura that it created. A lot of them backed out. And that is why when we had that only investor left at that time was Liberty House.
Amtek Auto. For that also, the highest bidder has been announced. It is Liberty House in the United Kingdom, with the highest bidder for Amtek Auto. It's issued a press release confirming that and saying it's working with the committee of creditors to secure as many as 6,000 jobs.
But after a few months, Liberty House's bid fell through.
Liberty House had emerged as the highest bidder at that point with a bid of about 4,300 crore rupees. However, at this stage, we are given to understand that the resolution plan submitted by Liberty House was not followed. In fact, they still did not make any of the payments outlined in the resolution plan to banks.
Finally, in 2021, after a second bidding process, an American hedge fund called Deccan Value Investors emerged as the winning bidder for Amtek. But this investor too didn't come up with some great plan for it.
See, Deccan Value also offered some 2,500 crore. But then it was not that they were giving all of the money as in cash. They were saying that we'll give you 500 crore upfront, but the balance amount will be given to you only when we sell these assets. So it was a conditional offer.
So as a veteran in the banking space, did you feel like this was the end of the story, or did something tell you that there were many loose ends and irregularities that would come to light sooner or later?
What thing really struck me was the audit report, which came to light back then. Not at that time, but it did occur to us that there were a lot of related party transactions. And whenever there's a company with too many related party, it really rings a bell that something is not right. So one of the things that is pointed out in the audit report is that it had 96 potential related party transactions and only 33 of them were disclosed. Now, this is very concerning. And the report also pointed out that about 300 or some 400 crore of potential related party transactions were done without supporting documents. So we don't know whether this is just a tip of the iceberg. And then there was another big flaw that the RP is from EY and the audit was done by EY.
Right.
Now that's a huge conflict,
Correct.
So you can't have the same person playing the role of an administrator and picking holes in the books.
Got it. So Sangita, the whistleblower has alluded to a scam worth 12,000 crore rupees. What are the lenders saying about this?
Lenders are the most affected party because, they've lost a lot of their money. And the worst thing is there is very little hope of recovery. So basically, the recovery which come only with investigative agencies are able to get hold of some kind of money trail that, this money has gone here and we can recover it from here. But that looks it's almost like wishful thinking. So remember one thing, that the total loan that Amtek Auto has is roughly 20,000 crore plus. But the point is that what have they got in return? They've just got some 2,700 crore offer from Deccan Value. And Deccan Value will pay, or any bidder for that instance, will pay only what is the value of the asset that is there in the company. So where has the balance 18,000 crore gone? And that is something which investigative agencies will really need to work on.
So I asked Sangita and Jyotindra, is this the end game for Arvind Dham and Amtek? Or the beginning of it at least?
See, I would say that the beginning of his end started when it entered insolvency, because 50% of his stake which he had in Amtek was wiped out. Mm-hmm. So if you say beginning of his end of his personal wealth, yes. I mean, because a lot of his, or at least I assume, and I guess that is why the investigative agencies are after him, is that a lot of money is siphoned off. And that's an assumption. Like, for instance, who knew that, they have a company called, which is a listed company, Rola Tainer, and it has 50% stake in Barista. Arvind Dham's daughter, Anamika, she was on the board of this company. And at present, Arvind Dham's sister, Anita, she's running the company. She's actually in charge of the operations of the company. So, and this is just one such example. And Barista is such a known brand. If you look up at MCA data, Arvind Dham's son and Arvind Dham's daughter are into at least on the board of 10 companies which are into real estate, which are into steel. Now, how did they, what are they doing? These are not listed companies, but these are companies which are there in MCA database. So probably they should strongly pursue to recover their loans.
Absolutely.
But a lot will depend on how investigative agencies are able to pursue without any interference on, in this particular case.
Arvind Dham is already out from Amtek Group, but definitely he has siphoned off funds. And if this whistleblower complaint is being heard by the Supreme Court, then definitely will be taken into judicial custody for sure.
The Amtek story could really be a riveting corporate thriller on any OTT platform. It starts like a Bildungsroman and turns into a story of hubris and fall. It has intrigue, wealth, corporate aggression, various layers of dubious transactions, conduits, cops, and a courtroom drama. From being a big beneficiary of Indian liberalization to one of the country's first court-admitted bankruptcy cases to now a scam worth thousands of crores. It's also a case study in the pitfalls of the Indian corporate world and how its rules are constantly being gamed. The ongoing probes may open several more worm cans, and the court is bound to take a very harsh view of things. Will the banks recover some of their money? Will Arvind Dham and his family's other investments come under the scanner? Will the criminal complaint stand? I don't know about corporate potboilers, but the answers to all of this may well call for another episode on The Morning Brief. That's it for today. This is your host Anirban Chowdhury on The Morning Brief, the official podcast of The Economic Times. This episode was produced by Sumit Pandey, sound designer Indranil Bhattacharjee, executive producer Arijit Barman. Do share this episode if you liked it. Listen to new episodes of The Morning Brief every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on all your favorite listening platforms: Amazon Music, Gaana.com, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Also, the Economic Times website, and of course, our very own audio platform, ET Play. Keep listening, thank you, and have a very good day. All clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.